Anyway, so thanks very much for joining me on a Saturday morning. I know Saturday mornings are very precious, but I've also really benefited from Saturday school in the past as well. And I'll go into how I started with the Internet Business School as well. So we will have a chance for a Q&A later, but if you want to pop any questions or comments in the chat, as long as they're clean and polite, that would be great. So I'll keep you about an hour. And this is what we'll go through. I'm going to talk about the power of being seen and heard. What I think is the vast and largely untapped opportunity that's out there, because I think for a lot of businesses, you probably don't even think of, perhaps I could get my business in the media, and certainly not could I get my business on the BBC, because, you know, the BBC doesn't do advertising. So there is a way around it though, and it's what I call a win-win. We'll talk about my top 3 ways to get media coverage, and we'll talk a bit about what might be stopping you. And then I'll also introduce you to my special training. I've put together a media mastermind because 20 years experience, my brain is full of news stories and the sorts of stories that get covered in the media. And I've kind of downloaded that and created a special course for you. And I've also, you know, because I've come through Saturday school and Internet Business School training myself, I have put together some special editions literally just for today. Nobody else gets those. So do stick around till the end, and hopefully that will be of interest. So this is me. Well, this was me. I am Rachel Lawson, or you might also see me go by the name of Rachel Davis. So like if you look up on my LinkedIn, I've got this really weird amalgamated name that's got both in there. That's just my married name, but I've always been Rachel Lawson professionally. I have worked at Radio 1. I was at Radio 1 late 90s and early 2000s. So if you listen to Radio 1 at that point, you will have heard me on the news or reporting from Frankfurt, from Wales, from flooded areas in Worcestershire, all over the place, from Cornwall, the eclipse in Cornwall. But most of my time, I've actually been in BBC Local Radio. I've done all the roles. I've reported, I've produced programmes. I've been a news editor for a very long time and a manager of people. And I've also put, I'm a grammar pedant. I did spot a couple of spelling errors last time I went through this presentation, which is a bit embarrassing, but hopefully I've corrected those now. But if you spot any, let me know. Obviously, I'm also an entrepreneur, and my time at the BBC particularly has been in 2 massive chunks. So I did 10 years, which involved time at Radio Northampton, Radio York and Radio 1, and then another massive chunk at BBC Radio Wiltshire. Now, this picture of me looking very youthful and very happy and a little bit cheesy was because I was, for the first time, being allowed to present the Drive Time programme, which was a bit of a dream come true before I went to Radio 1. Because back in those days, they didn't really think that women on the radio were very popular. We've turned that around a little bit now. And in my past, I've been a ballroom and Latin American dancer. I used to compete all around the country in an all-girl couple, and I was the boy, because at that point I was taller than my partner. And although you can't see me standing up, I am one of the shortest people that you would ever meet. I'm only just over 5 foot. I'm also a mum of 2. I've put almost grown up. So my daughter actually turned 18 the other day. So neither of them's properly grown up. And I am a complete Grecophile. So, you know, my big dream is to have a place in Greece on the island of Kefalonia and at least spend part of the year there, if not all of it. Now, as you can imagine, kind of up to the end of 2019, I was busy running a newsroom, had 2 kids, teenagers. They're not the easiest to kind of cope with. I felt a lot of the time like I was just spinning plates. And the day job when you're running a newsroom is not 9 to 5. And when the Salisbury poisonings happened, you know, I was on call kind of 24 hours a day, and it was an incredible time. But I was getting calls at 2 in the morning saying something's happened in Amesbury. Do you want to send a reporter down? And, you know, I was masterminding a lot of the BBC's coverage of that story and feeding in news lines and that kind of thing into the big news machine. And I was beginning to feel I needed a new direction, because I didn't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. I wanted the freedom, and I want to be a digital nomad. So I want to create digital streams of income so that I can kind of work anywhere and go anywhere. And I'm sure a lot of you have the same sort of ambition, really. And I was really lucky. So I joined the Internet Business School, and actually by chance during the first coronavirus lockdown, I was already well into doing the digital marketing diploma that the Internet Business School offers, and passed it during the first lockdown, I think it was, certainly that summer. And then the chance of redundancy came up at the end of 2020, which I was very lucky to get. And so I left the BBC, though I didn't leave the BBC very successfully, because I'm now back as a freelancer. But the beauty of that is I've got the freedom to say yes and no to whatever shifts I'm offered. And because I'm really experienced and I am really good at what I do, generally I get offered the chance to read the news, and that's what I love doing. It's a 4 o'clock start, but you know, you get a chance to be on the radio. I also realized during coronavirus that I have a really big driver in me that wants to help people, because actually I wasn't not bothered what the news was, because obviously coronavirus was just all encompassing. It was the only news story that we had. But what I was mostly concerned about was my team, and also helping people that desperately needed help. And that's where things like radio can really come into its own. And also, now that I haven't got a BBC staff job, I'm now free to pass on my insider knowledge of what I know about the campaigns and the strategy and the thinking, who they're targeting. Sorry, my cat is just about to walk past the screen. I gave you the memo earlier that you were to leave me alone. He didn't read it. Anyway, he might settle down now. So let's talk a bit then about the power of being seen and heard, and quite away from being in the media, just having somebody really listen to you and understand what you're saying without comment, without judgment, or really seeing you as a person without comment, without judgment. That's one of the most powerful things in life. And I hope that you all have the chance to have that in your lives. That's getting a bit deep, really. But this is what I love particularly about radio. And I'll talk mostly about BBC local radio, but a lot of this applies to all media. Now, obviously, if you get on the radio, it gets your name out there, your personal name, your brand name, your company name, that kind of thing. So let me just move him off the table. Then, you know, there's in marketing, we talk about the drip effect. So there's two things, aren't there? There's, if you repeatedly are heard and your name gets mentioned repeatedly, there's the drip effect. So it gradually enters somebody's consciousness. And there's lots of different marketing theories on how long that takes, how many mentions that takes, all of which is probably nonsense, because actually what really happens, if you appear, say, on a BBC local radio breakfast programme, there are tens of thousands of people listening at any one time. So the chances of a proportion of that audience looking for your product or your service at that time is actually quite high. It might only be a handful of people, but it's about being in front of the right people. And if you're doing an interview or taking part in a program in any way, it's a really intimate medium, because people have to listen to you, because you're only going on audio. They can't judge you on how you look. They can only judge you on how you sound, the sorts of things that you're saying. So if you are talking with warmth, authority, passion, knowledge, credibility, perhaps adding some advice or expertise to a topic, it's what Simon says. It gives you an absolute chance for people to know, like, and trust you. And so that is, for your 3 minutes of fame on the radio or whatever, that is your chance. That is your audience, and giving them the chance to really get to know you. And in that moment, they'll decide whether they want to buy your product either now or in the future. And that's where this has such immense power over other forms of visibility. So you might do Facebook ads, but people don't know you from Adam, as the saying goes. Leaflet drops, we all know that a lot of them barely get glimpsed at and get stuck in the bin. Whereas, you know, this is a chance for people to really hear what you're about, your ethos, what you stand for. And so if people do come to you, having heard you on the radio, or to a lesser extent seeing you in the newspaper or on an online article, one, it gives you both common ground, something to talk about. There's no sales pitch involved. They've already decided that they like you. They've already decided that they want to buy something from you. And the other side of that which is where the win-win aspect comes in, is that the media also start to get to know you as well. If you start contacting newsrooms or appearing on the radio, appearing in the newspaper, they get to know you as a reliable source of information or a reliable expert. And we'll come on to that in a bit. And that really is where it is kind of a balancing act. It's a relationship that you're building basically with a newsroom, and it works both ways. So what I found as a news editor is, well, quite often, well, every day you get news stories that you want people to be able to add something to either their expertise or their experience. And you might have a whole county of people to choose from, but you don't know how to look for those people. So this is about getting businesses to be much more proactive about getting in touch and putting themselves in the right place at the right time to be seen by a journalist and go, I can talk about this topic. Great, I was looking for somebody on this topic, and putting those together. And it's so much less effort on both sides. That's why it's a win-win. And obviously, what we all want is more traffic to our websites, to our shops, whatever. And so, like I was talking about, your opportunity for BBC Local Radio, let's say, is tens of thousands of people listening to you of a morning. And undoubtedly, that's going to drive really hot leads to your website. Now, you really need to make sure, if you've got a website, a social media platform, that people will Google and find you. One, that they can find you when they Google you, because I did this the other day with somebody. I said, what's the name of your company? And it was just his name, which was fine, but that didn't really throw up the right results. I said, what's your business name? And it didn't give any clue about what he did. So really, your business name, like free media publicity, it needs to basically do what it says on the tin for the best effects. So when they Google you, they've got to be able to find you easily. And on that website or social media platform, you need a way to capture them. So you need to make sure, as Jay was saying earlier, that you've got like an email system set up that you can capture those people. They can get in touch really easily. So now this is a woman who basically has cracked it. And she's local to me. So I've known Kerry. She wouldn't know me, I don't think, but I've known about Kerry for many years. So Kerry started as just a contributor on our lunchtime programme, talking about any news story that came up on the day, basically. And she wasn't on every day, she was on like every few weeks. And she would, just have an opinion about stories. But obviously we got to know her as a dairy farmer. She could talk about anything to do with farming, cows, anything to do with milk products, anything to do with getting up early in the morning. There are always lots of other bits that you can talk about connected to your job that is not just about what you're selling. And over the years, Kerry's won awards that we've talked to her about because she's told us about them. We also had an amazing incident, not an amazing incident, a dreadful incident, the terrorist attack at Westminster Bridge. And Kerry was inside the House of Commons getting an award at the time, which we didn't know, but we spoke to the local MP just to check everybody was safe. Are you all right to talk to us? And he told us that Kerry was there. And we had such a good relationship with her that we knew that we could risk phoning her, even in that high, tense, scary situation, and she wouldn't hold it against us for phoning her. It's really hard as a journalist sometimes. I know people don't have much sympathy because, and I've in the past have been called a parasite on society for just trying to speak to somebody about a story. So I get it. I understand completely why people feel the way they do. And as journalists, it's a tough call to make. It's a call nobody wants to make. You're right next to where this terrorist attack is happening. Can you tell us about it? But because we had that relationship with her, she trusted us, we trusted her, and we trusted her to say no if she wasn't comfortable with it, and that wouldn't spoil our ongoing relationship. And she did it. She spoke to us. She was actually cowering under a table at the time, and obviously she's fine. Now, what I kind of want you guys to realise the enormity of what's possible is, if you get into the BBC contact system, then, and you agree that your contact can be held and be visible to all of BBC News, that is it. Every journalist who works in BBC News will be able to find you. And that's what's happened in Kerry's case. I mean, she's been on regional telly before, but this was a story a few weeks ago about how Morrison's were going to switch from use by dates for milk to best before dates. Quite a bold move in the industry. And so this would have been set up probably either on the Friday or over the weekend, probably over the weekend because it's breakfast news. They've got people in. And they could see from the number of scripts in the system, how many times Kerry's been on, the sorts of things she talked about, her contact numbers, that she, she's happy to be called. And she won't have been the only dairy farmer contact, but she would have been high on the list, I imagine. And so she will have got the call over the weekend. She would have said, yeah, I'm happy to get up even earlier than I normally do to make sure you can set up your cameras, as you can see, light it properly so that you've got my cows in the background and we can talk about this. Now, admittedly, you can see that's 6:30 in the morning. That's quite a commitment. And how many people are listening at that time of day? Well, actually, a lot. If this was an advert on ITV for 30 seconds, a targeted advert about your product, this would cost about £7,000. But this was a 3-minute interview on, a similar audience on the BBC. And she didn't just get this one shot at it. This was also on at 7:30, at 8:30. That interview was then sent round all of the BBC radio stations. Basically, once you've appeared on the BBC, that can be used by any other part of the BBC. And I was also reading the news this particular morning. And because she is from Wiltshire, I took little snippets of what she said, we call them news clips, and used those in my news bulletins from 7 in the morning until lunchtime. So that is an enormous amount of exposure. She's not paid a penny for that. Her investment has been building up that relationship with the media, basically. And she completely understands the value of it because she's now one of the go-to people and she knows that's going to drive more traffic. And she's an incredibly successful dairy farmer. They make a lot of good cheese. I hope that makes sense. So I really honestly believe the biggest opportunity for anybody kind of starting out and wanting to cut their teeth and get some visibility, some media coverage is BBC Local Radio. And here is why. There are 40 BBC local radio stations. Generally, each one covers about a county. It's a little bit rougher than that, but if you think about it like that, that's how it's kind of carved up. And between them, they put out 4,000 hours of broadcasting every week. And at key times of the day, 60% of that has to be speech because the government says it has to be. That's what makes BBC local radio different from, say, Heart and Capital Network, all that stuff. And obviously that can't just be the presenter prattling on about whatever they want to talk about. It's got to be quality. And because it's BBC local radio, it's got to be different from what the national radio stations are offering. So that means they're desperate to talk to local guests who are good at talking, who have good stories, who have real value to offer. Now, you might be surprised to know that it is now the 3rd most listened to network behind Radio 2 and Radio 4. Radio 2 won't surprise you. It is the biggest network. Loads of people love Radio 2. The music's great. They get all the celebrity guests because they're Radio 2. And obviously Radio 4 is seen as the absolute gold standard, particularly when it comes to political interviewing, that kind of heavyweight ABC One audience. And straight after that is BBC local radio, not even Radio 1 anymore. And there are certain times in the day where they do all join up. It's kind of in the smaller hours, so like 5 in the morning and a bit more at weekends, where it's like one big BBC local radio station. And as I touched on, once you've appeared in the news, that news belongs to everybody. So within the BBC, that can get shared everywhere. So if your story is of national importance, talking about a national story, then there are ways where we can send that round to absolutely everybody. So you might appear on BBC Radio Wiltshire, but your little snippet, your news clip might appear on Radio 4, for example. But also, if you appear on the BBC and particularly on television, once you're seen, other people want a bite of that. So other news organisations like Sky and ITV and the national papers, they all want to pick up on that. A really good example is a guest who was local to us in Wiltshire, and sorry to keep going on about Wiltshire, it's just what I know most about, but this is a good example. It's a man who, even before all the bills started going up, was struggling to pay his fuel bills. You might actually have seen him, but once his kids had gone to bed, they switched off everything, just had candles on, and he couldn't afford to fill his oil tank. And so we spoke to him first, and then the regional TV station got him on, and then 5 Live spoke to him as well. Then he appeared on You and Yours, and so it goes on. You know, it's that snowball effect. Everybody wants him because he's what we call a really good case study. He's a really good example of someone who shows how the cost of living is affecting people. You know, you look for kind of quite often those extreme examples. And the other great thing that I really want people to milk is you can use any coverage in your marketing. And as Jay hinted, having the BBC on your site really does add kudos. So imagine this now, you've just done an interview, either on BBC local radio or television. If this makes you nervous, just put that to one side for a second. Imagine you've done that interview, it's gone really well. You can then use that on your social media and on your website. More than that, if you're the sort of person that posts a lot of stuff and blogs about stuff on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that stuff, you can do what I call a narrative arc. So you can talk about how you've been asked to contribute. You can talk about the morning of the interview, about how you're feeling about it. You can point people to when you're going to be on. You can then post the interview, and then you can talk afterwards about the effect of that, because you'll find that people come up to you and say, I heard you on the radio, thought you were really great, or thought you were really funny. And the best way to approach it is just like a chat. Don't worry too much about being really formal. The point of radio is just like this. I'm just chatting to you. This is kind of how it works, really. I think people get a bit scared. So Andrew's saying, I remember a day going back several years ago, was minding my own business, working on my eBay business. My mobile rang. I just picked it up and it was, I can't read the rest of the message, Radio for Money program. To start, I thought it was a prank, but learned it was not. The girl said someone who, why is this not working? It's gone right to the top of the chat again now. Someone who was due to talk about eBay, cried off, would I be interested in talking about eBay with them, took a deep breath, thought, why not? Excellent. We'll have a few days or weeks to plan. She said when? She said 90 seconds, lol. Yep, that is what can happen. And we'll talk about how much news is planned in a bit. That's an excellent story. And well done for saying yes, that is exactly the right thing to do. So here are some of the secrets of news. The first one, as Adrian's just said, well, this is the opposite of what Adrian says. It doesn't all happen on the day. In fact, most news is actually planned. Now, there obviously are times where journalists are in a crisis, and we'll talk about this later on as well, and they will just search for anything and pick whatever, or they'll go to their go-to experts. So when I say most news is actually planned, if you look at the news today, and I had a quick scan, so obviously there's the latest in Ukraine. That's just largely talking about what's happening on the ground. It's all horrendous. The latest political things, the latest military intelligence, that's kind of an ongoing news story. You'd expect it to be in the news, and you'd probably ask why it's not there if it's not at the moment. There's a story about council tax rebate and how scammers are targeting people who are waiting for their council tax rebates. Now, that isn't necessarily a story that has to be told today. It might be that there's a report out today that's got today's date on, which is why it's running today. If not, it's just a story that could just as easily have gone yesterday, next week, that kind of thing. But it's the sort of thing you want to get out there because you want to inform people. The Invictus Games, and obviously following whatever Meghan and Harry are doing, that's a known event. So we know the Invictus Games are happening. The surprise, I suppose, was that they visited the Queen, but people will have been watching that. There's quite a nice story today. It's not nice for the poor person involved. I keep saying that. It's about a chap who, I think he worked for the RNLI, and he was in the River Severn, and he caught a really horrible bug called, this is a newsreader's nightmare, giardiasis. I don't know how you say it, but it's the sort of thing where if you have anything you can add on that story, so if it's in the news, and this is a Welsh story, but other stations will probably run it. So if you're a wild swimmer, for example, you could talk about what precautions you take, or if you've had that horrible bug, you could talk about your experience of that. That's just something to throw out there. And similarly, that's not a story that necessarily has to be told today. It's just there because Wales have decided that's when they're telling the story. And you'll find in tomorrow's papers, the Sunday papers typically preview big reports that are coming out the next week, typically from the government. And things like the Rwanda weird newsline that we're going to send, certain asylum seekers to Rwanda. That was a report that journalists knew about like the day before. So it started being covered the day before, and then there was the day where it was actually announced, and then there was a reaction to it all and everything. So that's kind of how it goes. But most news is planned literally the day before. It's set up the day before, and then there are breaking news stories on the day that you want to react to, and also situations where your guest has pulled out or taken ill, that kind of thing. Now, there are times where media organisations do take the easy option. So that is, they will go with anybody who can talk. So in Adrian's case, they desperately needed a guest to talk about eBay, and they will have looked through contacts or Googled eBay expert, and they'll have just phone bashed, picked up the phone and just kept going until somebody said, yes, I'll come on. And that's where you need to say, yes, I'll come on, even if you are bricking it and thinking, oh my God, what have I just agreed to? Because how bad can it be? It's your topic. They're not going to try and trip you up. You've got them out of a hole. So they are forever grateful. So, and media organisations always have go-to guests on certain topics. And as a result, they do get more media coverage. They are trying to widen the net constantly to find other guests. But ultimately, it comes down to who are the people who consistently show up and turn up to talk. And finally, it's not all news. If you look at a newspaper, there are those stories that make you smile. There is a big drive for more community-led stories, animal stories, quirky stories, good news stories, basically. Stuff that typically will go at the end of the news. And at the moment, particularly, I would say we really need it. So, with the Ukrainian war, all the stuff about the cost of living, how much loads of people are struggling, still the effects of coronavirus, you need those stories at the end of your news. It's kind of takes it's like a pressure cooker. You're building up a pressure cooker, and you need to leave people with kind of a bit of hope and a smile on their face. And there are no end of people doing stuff for charity, that kind of thing. And there's a big move to make sure those stories are included. And sometimes those are the easiest ones to get coverage on as well. So what can you do? So this is the first of my 3 tips. And when we talk about news, I think most people have a very fixed view of what they think is news. It's the stuff that makes the front page of the newspapers, that kind of thing. It's like Ukraine, it's like the cost of living. And it might be that you can contribute to those stories. Maybe you've helped in an aid effort for Ukraine. Maybe you have knowledge of Ukraine and Russia. Maybe you're going to take in somebody who's fled the fighting. Obviously, and the cost of living is going to affect everybody, even if it doesn't affect you, if you see what I mean. If you have enough money that the soaring energy costs and national insurance and everything else doesn't really touch you, that in itself is a story, because you might have advice for people that you can pass on. I mean, you wouldn't want to come on the radio and crow about it, but necessarily, because you want people to admire you for what you've done and not think you're kind of lording it over other people. And there are really typical sorts of news stories. So you might have new jobs to offer people. You might be expanding in a major way. You might have a new product that you're launching, particularly if it's like got something green about it. You might have won awards. You might have done something really innovative to cut your carbon footprint, that kind of thing. But also there are kind of what I'd call softer stories that actually are nicer to tell. They could be about a real client success. Maybe you've got a client whose life you've completely turned around because of your work with them. Maybe you've got an employee who is a hero, and I've only used that as a kind of a catch-all term, because it might be like a Kickstarter apprentice you've taken on, or someone who dropped out of school and really didn't look like they had any hope, but you kind of took them under your wing, or just someone who goes all out to help other people, or you might be putting on a charity event or something similar to that. And here is an example. Now, some stories take a lot longer to kind of come to fruition than others. So a lot of the time we can be quite reactive, or we can manage the news agenda. So you might write a press release about something that's connected to a certain day. This has taken quite a long time. This is a story I've been working on for several months, but it's because we needed that shell of a car to be in the right place. So this car's called a Delahaye. There are hardly any of them in the world. And even in that state, where it has no engine and almost no bodywork, it's worth £1 million. It's owned by a woman who owns many, many classic cars, and she's entered the Pebble Beach race, Pebble Beach, I don't know what it is. It's a big car competition, and she won it with this Delahaye when it was in its prime, and it's beginning to fall apart, so she wants it to be done up. Now, it so happens that I've been in touch with the man who's been chosen to do the work, and as you can imagine, that isn't going to be cheap, but it's such an exceptional story because it's the lifestyle that this woman has, but it's kind of a bit of our history. It's really rare. He's a very exceptional craftsman, and it's a great picture story. So, you know, I've been in touch with the regional journalist about this, and it took quite a few months, but now that the car's in place, this is kind of the start of the story, because obviously you can see it like this, but we also want to see how it turns out, and then we want to see whether it wins the prize again. And so this is Stephen Sowerby. He's the craftsman who's doing all the work, and he hadn't even thought about perhaps getting any media coverage for this. And since he was on Points West a few weeks ago, the very next day, the Daily Telegraph got in touch. And last week, ITV, this is the ITV crew, filmed, and it went out, I think, on the television last Monday. Now, I haven't caught up with him again since then, but after it appeared on television the first time, he got 2 leads, one of which I think has just signed. Now, 2 leads, that might not sound like very much, but for him, these are 5-figure leads, basically. He obviously can't have many clients at any one point, but one client is you know, one person's, you know, decent salary for most people. So true, Andrew, today's world, it's all instant, hence we need to have some data ready with us before going around looking to share our thoughts or area of interest. It is a good point. There will be things where you don't need to do that, because it might just be talking about you might want to just be talking about your experience. If you're talking about an area of expertise where you need to be really on top of your facts and figures, then you're right. But you know, most people know enough about their industry that you will know kind of all those things, the turnover, the percentages, that kind of thing. I'm really sorry about this. My cat is bugging me, so I'm just going to open the door to let him out. 2 seconds. I even bribed him with chicken earlier so that he wouldn't do that. He's a monkey. Right, there we go. Right, and this is an example of how it doesn't have to be a hard news story. It could just be an event, and it could be an event about pumpkins.
And as Halloween gets underway, families are being encouraged to try their hand at pumpkin picking in Gloucestershire. Cotswold Farm Park is opening up for people to gather the fruit for carving. Owner Adam Henson says they've got all different sizes in their fields.
So our pumpkin patch is in full flow. So we've got all sorts of wonderful pumpkins in our fields for people to go and discover.
Now, hopefully you could hear that. That was a news bulletin from Gloucestershire. So a guest had appeared on the breakfast programme at the weekend talking about a Halloween trail of pumpkins. It's not a massive news story, but it was a good 3 or 4 minutes on the breakfast programme, and as I said, it got clipped for news bulletins, and the newsreader, you know, ran that all morning. And it is the sort of story where people will then phone the radio station to ask for more information. What time's it open? Where was it again? That kind of thing. And it's not a massive news story. It's not going to be the front page of the Sun, but it did get a lot of exposure for that particular farm. So if you are going to create a news story around your business, so let's say it's about a real client success that you've got, you typically will need to write a press release if this is the first time that you're getting in touch with a media organisation. Now, there's a real art to writing a press release that works, and it is a big topic, but these are this is my quick and dirty guide. Here's a few tips for you. So the biggest one is when you write the subject line, so the bit that quite often we forget to write, and you press send and it goes, you're sending this without a subject, that bit, that's probably the most important bit, because the way that a lot of inboxes are set up. Sometimes that's all you can see, and you're judging whether you're going to press the delete button or whether you're going to read some more. Now, if it's for a local organisation, for local radio, local papers, that kind of thing, just mention the place name that it involves. So if it's client success, you could say, woman from Hunstanton loses 8 stone after using this special technique or whatever. And that means that local journalist, because they're looking for local stories that might be, that are special to their area, they will open it and read it and see if that's a story they can tell on the radio, in the paper, or online. That is the biggest tip. I had one the other day which just said Testfest returns, and I thought, I have no idea what that is. I did have time to read it, and it was a special festival for raising money for testicular cancer across the southwest. I think it was a cycle ride. It was a special day of events anyway. What I'm trying to get across to you, saying Testfest returns, unless you know what Testfest is, means nothing. But testicular cancer, now that's a story that actually a lot of people will resonate with. And if it had actually got Southwest in there or Wiltshire in there, then I definitely would have been more interested. Now, one of the things it's really tempting to do is write in a way that shows how clever you are, how many big words you know, and you know about your industry. And so it's really tempting to put in industry jargon, the abbreviations that we all use in our industries. Forget all that. Pretend you are writing for an elderly auntie who knows nothing about what you do. Write the press release, what's going to interest them about it, and what's going to interest a journalist about it. And it's quite a balancing act, because you're trying to interest the journalists. So why would they want to tell this story to their audience, their viewers, their readers, their listeners? But you're also writing it for their audience. Why would they be interested in what you've got to say? And write it really simply. So, and also the things that you hold really dear quite often are not the things that are interesting to other people. It is true. Tim, which link are you looking for? I think that was relating to what Jay was doing earlier. Mark says, is it true PRs are cut from bottom up newspapers, so important to have the who, what, etc. info? Hi, my chat is playing up, just a sec. Who, oh, hi, that was the end. Cut from the bottom up. Not quite sure what you mean, Mark, but newspapers particularly have very few journalists, so they have to really prioritize what they're doing. But similar to local radio, they really want local content for their local papers. So if you send in a really good press release with a really good picture, they will often, this might be what you mean, copy and paste what you've written and literally just regurgitate the whole thing. And I know they do it because I've also had the same press release that they've had, and have actually compared and contrasted the two. I've had the newspaper next to the press release, and not in a judgmental way, they're really stuck. So, if you can make their job easy for them with a really lovely picture, because that's what's going to make it for newspapers, and make it stand out, then yeah. Or do you mean the who, what, etc. information? There is quite a lot of information that you need to have. So if it's tied to a particular date, that will help a journalist prioritize whether they need to act on it now or whether it's something to put in the diary for a later time. The who to contact is really important to have on there. I've put send it in good time, and don't be afraid to send it again closer to the time that it might be for. And also the who needs to be available for interview. We had an example the other day when Wales, talking a lot about Wales news today anyway, Wales outlawed smacking basically, and the NSPCC sent round a press release everywhere saying what their stance was. Obviously we think this is a not before time, great, when's England going to do it, something like that. Would you like to speak to somebody? And obviously lots of places did want to speak to somebody, but when they phoned the press office or the PR agency, they said, oh, the 3 people that we thought would be available for interview now aren't, they're all on holiday. Would you like to do it on Tuesday? Of course, everybody went, no, well, the story is on Monday. So no, we don't. And so that was largely a waste of time. Obviously not for the print media who can copy and paste it, but for any of the broadcast media, yeah, they missed out on an awful lot of coverage just because they thought they had someone available for interview, but they didn't. And the biggest bugbear of any journalist, and I know this because I've asked a lot about press releases, is sending a press release and then literally having no one available, or sending a press release and going on holiday. Sometimes you just can't get hold of anybody to even talk about it, let alone set up an interview. So yeah, there is that. A lot of, you know, PR companies, the big ones that deal with massive corporate companies, you know, it's quite often the last job you'll do on a Friday afternoon. You press send, you put it on your out of office, and you go off to Tenerife for 2 weeks, and then the journalist gets it, goes, oh, this sounds interesting, and phones up and no one's available. Anyway, I think you get the point. And the other thing is, don't give up. You probably won't get a reply, but do keep trying. Now, this is something I've changed, because as a news editor and as a journalist, you literally get hundreds of emails into your inbox, and it can be exhausting, really, because you're filtering through trying to find the stuff that's really interesting and important. But because I can now see it from another side, I can see why they send the same press release out several times, because the second time you send it, you might get a different journalist, a different pair of eyes, someone with a bit more time, or a different, who can see potential in a story that someone else doesn't. But also, quite often journalists won't reply until they absolutely need to, and that absolutely need to is probably the day before. So just because you've sent in a press release and heard nothing about an event or something you're doing in the following week, say, don't be downhearted. It doesn't mean they haven't got it. It doesn't mean they've deleted it. It doesn't mean they're not interested. And so if you don't hear anything, of course, you're perfectly justified to send another email just saying, just checking you saw this. This is the local link. This is why you might be interested. And you might get a reply then, but again, you might not. Journalists are really busy. Now, how I've changed is now I do reply to people, because I know they're waiting to find out whether you're interested. I just let them know if I've passed it on, whether it's of interest. I also do give some tips to people on what they can do to make what they're saying a bit better. So, you know, I've changed. I'm a different character. Anyway, I hope this is all making sense. Okay, so I've included some online examples, just because partly to demonstrate the BBC is enormous. It's not just BBC local radio and national radio. It's not just TV. The online presence is enormous. And as I'm sure you appreciate, the BBC brand for news particularly is incredibly well respected around the world. And the beauty of online stories is, as we know about the internet, it lives forever. It's there for good. And obviously, these are really easy things for you to share on your social media and on your websites. And also, they don't have to be really big news stories necessarily. So this is just an example of a woman who's a fashion designer, but she makes her dresses from duvets to be kinder to the environment. Now, this was from the tail end of last year. Green issues, anything about sustainability, eco, climate change, carbon footprint, all that stuff. That's going to be interesting to the news. It's going to be in the news for years and years to come. But it was at a point where there was a lot of topics talking about this at this particular point. So this woman's from Preston, you know, she's from Preston. It's a local story, but the fact it's got a video, this is either a social media video or it went on television like this. Undoubtedly, this will have been on the radio as well. And she's got a lovely bit of news coverage out of that. This is a less obvious example. So I want you to see yourself as a whole person. So you're not just about your business and what your business does. You are a whole person with lots of different experiences. We will come on to this in a little bit more detail in a minute. And this is a woman who chose to talk to the BBC about the menopause and about the HRT drugs. Now, interestingly, this came up in the news again yesterday, day before, something like that. But she talked about her experience. And you might say, how does this give her business any exposure whatsoever? I can't see it on my screen because I've got a big bar across it. But at the bottom of the screen, you can see that it mentions she runs a pub and I forget where it is. It's Kent somewhere like that. And so people in the area will know her, know that pub, but it also makes you feel really empathetic towards her. I hope it does. And if you went to that pub, wouldn't you say, I read your article, I'm going through the same thing, my wife's going through the same thing, I really can't imagine what you're going through. It gives you an insight into her life, makes you view her as a human being rather than just someone who's making money, and gives you something to talk to them about, and it deepens that relationship, and she'll get some more business out of it. And I've included this example just because it's a bit of an industry that's really cracked the whole PR thing, because press releases from auction houses get them all the time. And actually, they've got quite a good deal with some of the press agencies. So Press Association do quite a lot of auction stuff. And that's because they have cool stuff to sell. So they know when to pick out something that's really valuable or really rare or got a good backstory. And typically, you know, news organizations will pick up on things like this and preview it and say, this is coming up for auction. So they get a lovely bit of publicity beforehand, and then they will do how much it sold for at the end. So that's that story arc that I was talking about, where you get more than one bite at the cherry, basically. And here's an example of someone I've been working with, Helen. And what we did with Helen, I wanted to capitalize really on the beginning of the year when everyone's talking about new year, new you. We all make New Year's resolutions and want to improve our lives, and this is going to be the best year ever. Sorry, I sound a little bit cynical. I didn't mean to. But I love Helen's product because she's not your typical yoga bunny. If you search Google Images or similar for yoga, it's full of 20-somethings all looking very willowy. Helen's yoga is about yoga for the inflexible. So it's for older people who creak when they stand up and who recovering from illness and injury and that kind of thing. So I thought that was enough of a niche, enough of a quirk that would give a little bit of a hook. And so contacted BBC Radio Dorset and suggested they might like to get her on in the new year to talk about it. And they did. And she actually got the presenter to do one of her yoga exercises on the radio. And as you can see here, thanks to Rachel's help, I was able to talk about my business as a yoga teacher on local radio and encourage people to try yoga to increase flexibility. Now, Helen has actually more than doubled her number of clients since talking on the radio. She's got new clients at pretty much every week. And I talk to her regularly. She literally has gone from strength to strength. So she's doing incredibly well. Now, that's talking about, can you create a news story around your business? That's probably, I've started with the most difficult one, because unless there's something really obvious, it's quite hard to get your head around what a journalist might consider as a worthy news story. What is much easier, if you're happy to talk, and if you're not happy to talk, we can work on that. This is the bit that's really valuable. It's positioning yourself as an expert, and there will be things that you know more about than anybody else. So let's have a think about what else you're an expert in. And I'm sure the group have some really niche topics that perhaps they're a foremost expert in, that you know more about than most other people. Say it might be steam locomotives, it might be how to make biscuits, it might be pet care. So we're all experts in our own lives, and we are all things like homeowners or people who rent or people who've been homeless, people who are on the housing waiting list. You could be a parent or someone who's never been a parent for whatever reason. You could be a pet owner, not deliberately not a pet owner. You could be someone who's decided never to own a washing machine and always goes to the laundrette. Sorry, that's a bit niche. It's because I was looking at my washing machine. You could be someone who's an avid gardener. You could have magazines that are your niche interest. So this is talking about things that are not necessarily to do with your business. Online digital image protection. That's certainly niche, I think. And actually, it's something that crops up a lot, particularly in our business, because we're using a lot of images that we take from other areas. So the BBC has an agreement with various organisations that we can use certain images. And similarly, when you use packages like PowerPoint and Getty, there are certain, and Facebook ads, there are certain images you're allowed to use, but people quite often will Google images and just nick whatever they can, and you can't do that. Thanks, Danny. But Danny will know which ones you can and can't use, and the rest of us are going, oh, I'm not sure about this one. So yeah, do pop in the chat if you've got any other areas of that you're an expert in. And because local radio has that 4,000 hours of broadcasting, don't forget, there's a lot of talking points in that, and quite often the idea is they will appeal to as many people as possible. So it might be they're talking about gardening and you like gardening, you can just add your voice to that, and there'll be times where adding the name of your business is pertinent to that, and there might be times where it's not, but it is one way to get known. Now, I mentioned earlier that most media organizations will have a bank of experts who they talk to on a regular basis, and one of those during coronavirus, when the travel restrictions kept changing, and they're still changing this week, so a lot of areas have dropped all their restrictions this week or are going to next month, so even vaccination certificates are going for some areas. And those are occasions where you'd wheel out one of your travel experts to talk to. And at Wiltshire, we've probably got a bank of about 3, 4, 5 who we go to on a regular basis. And there are others who are less available. Now, this is a clip of me reading the news with one of the travel experts who we use. Sorry. Oh, we've just skipped on several slides. Shush, Jay. We don't want to hear from you yet.
The last 7 places are to be taken off the red travel list from 4 a.m. on Monday. It means no more hotel quarantine for those coming from parts of the Caribbean, Central and Southern America. Sarah Watts is a travel agent from Devices and says bookings are picking up.
We've been booking a lot of short-term departures, so going away in the next few months, but then also people planning out for 2022, 2023 as well. And the inquiries are picking up. Some people are just dipping their toe in the water just to see what the reality is like of being able to travel at the moment.
So like Jay was talking about earlier about creating a course. Now, you probably couldn't be an expert necessarily on creating a course and talk on the radio about it, but what the content of your course is, if that's like in health and nutrition or teaching people certain things, there might be an opportunity to talk about that. But you can also talk about being an entrepreneur, probably about working from home, about getting your head around new tech, about a lot of stories about how people have pivoted their lives during coronavirus. Mine's not quite that, but it's not far off it. One of the people that did my first course when I ran it, in fact, I had 2 people who've pivoted during coronavirus. One was quite high up in the post office and has decided she wants to go and run a B&B on the seaside, and has bought a building to do that. And another bloke who invented a product and moved across the world to come back to England during coronavirus. Those sorts of stories are lovely to tell. They've got a great backstory, which is kind of often a way in, because people want to hear those inspirational tales. But also then on the back of that, her local TV station, when she's up and running, want to use her as like, how was your first tourism season? And with the inventor chap, there might be an in with talking about his product at festivals, for example. Similarly, TV are interested in that one as well. So I forgot where I was going with that, but that's the general gist. And similarly, it doesn't have to be something really serious. It can be fun as well. So I don't have a clip to go with this one, but there's a chap who runs a toy shop who also has a Doctor Who fan club. And when the latest season of Doctor Who was on, he was got on as an expert, and he got a name check for both of his businesses. I didn't write it, and that was incredible. So this bloke, as Jay mentioned, I've worked with Jay, and he's done some training. I've done some training with him, but also I have helped him get in the newspapers and used him. That he's very, very into motivational speaking, into helping people be successful. And so if you cast your mind back to last summer, the Euros, where we'd got through to the final, England had got through to the final, and I wanted to do something about how Gareth Southgate might motivate his team. And And so I pitched Jay as an expert who might be able to talk about motivation, how you motivate teams of people. And he was picked up by 3 radio stations to talk about that. One radio station actually kept him talking for 15 minutes. And here is what he has to say.
From Serious About Success. Just shooting a quick video for Rachel, who I've been working with for the last few months. Now, just in the last few months alone, you know, Rachel has been able to help me get onto BBC Radio, not once, but twice. In addition to that, featured in the newspaper as well. Now, look, this has given my business a whole different level of credibility, you know, just being able to have the, you know, as seen on BBC Radio logo on my website, and as well as that, you know, have the recordings that I can play to people and stuff, you know, all it's done is given my business, you know, a whole, you know, further step of credibility, you know, which I'm very, very, very thankful for. You know, after being on BBC Radio, you know, within the first couple of days alone, I was able to generate an additional £2,000 in sales, you know, that was just in the first couple of days. So, you know, I can definitely see the power of being on local media like radio and newspapers, and this is stuff that I'm definitely looking to do more of moving forward. Now look, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without Rachel. You know, I wouldn't even have known where to get started if it wasn't for Rachel. So, you know, I'm definitely looking forward to working with Rachel more in the future, and I can definitely, you know, assure you that what she does, you know, she's very good at what she does. So thanks very much. Cheers.
And Jay's quite typical in that he hadn't really even thought of getting publicity on the radio, telly, newspapers until I mentioned it. And it's when I talk to people that I can really see the potential and how we might use those people on air and what subjects they might talk about. Jay said he'd been on twice. So I talked about how important it is to get into the BBC's contact system. When the latest series of The Apprentice was on, where it was just about to start, Radio Leeds called him out of the blue, a bit like Adrian earlier, to say would he come on and talk about what Alan Sugar should look for in his apprentice. What are those hallmarks of success that he talks about? So that was the second time. We also did a webinar together for Honda workers. That the Honda factory closed last summer in Swindon, and I thought it would be a good chance to introduce them to Jay in a way if they wanted to start their own business. So we did a webinar together on that. So this is quite often what journalists look like. You might think they look quite scary, like Jeremy Paxman, Jeremy Vine, asking tough questions. And obviously a big part of journalism is asking tough questions sometimes. Those tough questions, we call it holding to account interviews usually, and they're typically of people in positions of power. So politicians, you know, council leaders, that kind of thing. They're not usually business owners unless something's happened that needs addressing. So, you know, a care home that's got a bad CQC inspection. And it's, you know, a lot of people think I'm not going to speak about this. It's best I'm just going to keep quiet until it all dies down. The problem with that is in these days of social media, well, obviously you can keep quiet and don't say anything. And sometimes that might be the better option, but people speculate massively on social media. And the only way to give any clarity to a situation is to hear from the person who knows about it. So sometimes in those situations, it's ballsy, but it's good for someone to front up, say, I am going to talk to the media, I am going to tell it how it is. Yes, this is what happened at my establishment. These are the steps I'm doing about it. And may I please offer an apology to the family concerned or whatever. Now, people might still feel badly about that organisation, but that will fade. Or they might think, actually, the fact that you said you're going to do this about it, I've got a chance now to know, like, and trust you. I won't like what's happened in the past. It's a bit like with failing schools that suddenly get a lot of government attention. Sometimes they are the best organisations to go to. And if you know exactly who you're dealing with, you know they're not trying to hide anything, then people can make a much better and informed choice about whether they trust that organisation or not. Now, what I'm trying to get to here is kind of the situation that Adrian was the saviour of the day by coming on to Radio 4 to talk about eBay. And hopefully, Adrian, they've kept your contact details. I can check that for you. There are times in a journalist's life, and it happens, you know, far too often really, where guests pull out, your lead story falls down for the next day, and suddenly you've got like an hour and a half to build a whole new program. And that is where you want to be the person they call as the savior. You want to be the Adrian of this situation. So, you know, you want to have your press release lurking in an inbox that can be turned into a story quite quickly in the shape of a phone call. So you get that phone call that says, can you come on the radio to talk about this at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning? Even if your mind is going, I can't possibly do that. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I've got to get my hair done. I've got to get the kids to school. Say as close to yes as you can. If you can do it at all, say yes. If you can do it, but maybe a different time or record something, say, yes, I'd love to make that happen. Let's work out how we're going to do this. Because that is the start of that relationship, and it starts off the fact that you have got a journalist out of a hole, so that balance that I was talking about is in your favor from the offset. So Billy says, Rachel, who is the point of contact for local radio or TV, and how do we get the contact details? Well, I'll come onto that, Billy, because I've got a massive contact book with all local radio news editors and other journalists in it, which if you do my media mastermind, I can pass on to you. If not, you can find out, you know, generic newsroom contacts from things like social media. If you look on their Twitter, Facebook, I don't think it's on the websites, but it might be. They're all different, so I can't like give you an idea for what it will be. It's not like News Desk at Wiltshire. They've all the inboxes have kind of been set up differently. And I don't, you know, I can't pass on all the phone numbers here, but quite a lot of the Facebook pages have them on. They might have the newsroom phone numbers on there as well. That's the best that I can offer at this point on that one. So there is a way where you can take part without having to do an interview, and this is more the drip effect. This is more falling into people's consciousness rather than potential clients are listening. They hear you talking with authority about your topic and they fall in love with you and want to desperately buy your product because they happen to be listening to what you're selling at the right time for them. They are in the market for your product or service. This is more you're taking part in a debate and the awareness of you as a person or the name of your brand keeps cropping up, but dead easy to take part. So most radio stations will have talking points and debates at various points throughout the day, and you can just take part. Don't think it's going to get completely lost in a great big swathe of comments and not be read out. It might not be, but let me tell you about this example. You don't have to put it in the chat, but how would you have answered this question? When it comes to flexible working, what's it like where you work? Now, my argument to this is absolutely everybody could answer this question. If you don't work at all, you say, I'm lucky, I don't work at all. If you work for yourself, you would put something like, well, my boss is a real dragon, but at least she lets me have every Friday off when I want it because I work for myself at Free Media Publicity. And every which in between, you can say not flexible at all. I have to work 9 to 5, Monday to Saturday, week in, week out. Awful. You will be surprised to know absolutely nobody answered this question. Nobody phoned in, nobody texted, emailed, sent a message on WhatsApp, sent a message on Twitter, nothing, nada. Now, if you had been in the handful of people to reply to this, your message would probably have got read out several times, and that's several times of mentioning your name and your company. Thank you. I don't live in I don't live in the UK. Okay. Yeah, if you don't live in the UK, if you Google them, the BBC was always a little bit weird about people contacting newsrooms because all the newsroom numbers probably are ex-directory, and it's because you don't want troublemakers and time wasters, to be polite, phoning up. And we still do get those, but so typically all BBC premises would have a reception. Now, with all the cuts, only the bigger sites have a receptionist who answers the phone and picks up messages off the answer phone. And the same as, and obviously a lot of radio operations and media organizations are actually really quite small. So I would say social media is your best point of call to start off with to find contact numbers. Danny says, my flexible working includes calls all over the globe, different time zones and time of the clock, but love it. Glad to hear it. Nice. My flexible working means I can say yes or no to shifts, but it does involve a 4 o'clock start normally, and Saturday mornings and whenever I want to do this, and genuinely do love doing this. So these were my top 3 tips, just a quick recap. So we talked about creating a news story. You probably need to widen your understanding of what counts as a news story. Oh, there's a typing error. And in the first instance, you'll need to send out a press release or something close to a press release, because if you're introducing yourself to someone new who's never heard of you, you need to make sure that you come across as a credible person. And that's really tough in the kind of crowded marketplaces. So health, nutrition, weight loss, that kind of thing. You need to make sure that you build in there what your expertise is. The easier one, as I said, is being an expert, and it can be an expert on anything. But if you're talking about your business area, because that's the ideal, you can get in touch. You can just write an email, but you'll still need to put in there in the first instance, these are my credentials, basically. This is why you'll want to talk to me. But then once you've got an email exchange with a journalist, you've got a point of contact to then pitch other stories. So if a news story comes up that you think, oh, I can add something on that, that's the time. Just get in touch. If you want to talk to me about poached eggs, say you're in health and nutrition and you know a lot about poaching eggs, and it's in the news that day, you want to talk to me about poached eggs, I have 3 ways that I use and a favorite one. Happy to come on. Now, sometimes it can be lighthearted and jokey, and sometimes those are the things that get you the customers, because people see you as a rounded human being. Cool. Just checking up on the comments. And then there is the way to keep it simple. And if you are nervous about doing interviews, and you know, the whole world of the media and radio can seem really unnerving and another world, just start chipping away. Just send in the odd message and you'll realize then they're not all that. They're not all celebrities. They are just normal human beings, really. And they love the interaction. All presenters have got egos the size of houses, and they just like to know that people are listening. Some presenters just love the phone ringing, and just love people getting in touch, because they know that, you know, people are engaging in what they're saying. So next steps for success. If you've got any other questions, just pop those in the chat now and I'll get to those. I advise that wherever you are, because some people aren't in the UK, find your go-to media. Now, that there's two bits to that. Don't discount radio. I've bigged up the case for BBC Local Radio, and I've outlined why, but there are other local radio stations and they do local news, and kind of you will find it easier to get on a station that kind of the more local it is. And you've preempted me how to get in touch. Now, typically you can find that on their social media. Also find out what your local papers are. If you're in a bigger area like London and Manchester, your local papers typically will also cover national news. Quite often they might have a business expert or certainly a business section. It's worth finding out the journalist who covers those. Now, often underneath a story, particularly online, they will sometimes have little icons so you can contact them on Facebook, Twitter, email, all those different things. Or it might have their Twitter handle or their email address, because they want you to get in touch. If you're getting in touch with a TV journalist, I would say it kind of has to be on a bigger story, or you feel you can add value to a regional issue, but also specialist publications and specialist groups. Where does your client live? What do they read? And what could you add value to there? So that's that. So I suspect you guys fall into one of these categories. So you might be thinking, thanks for that, Rachel. That's very entertaining. I'm only saying that because people have told me it is. I know exactly what to do, and I'm going to get started tomorrow. In fact, you could get started today. Now, Easter weekend is a really good time to get in touch with radio stations, because the people listening have got more time on their hands. They've got more headspace. They've got a long bank holiday weekend where typically they don't have to work. So they're kicking back. They've got the radio station on. it's a big sigh of relief, and you might just come into their lives at the right point. Similarly, if you've kind of want to chip in, there might be a quiz or something. It might just be a good time to get started. Now, you might have a few questions. Is this even for me? Now, a lot of people do ask that. Typical questions are, I don't live in the UK. Does this work for me? And also, is this right for my business? Now, this will and can work for any business. Now, obviously, I've talked a lot about the BBC, but the advice works for anywhere and any publication really, and any business. Some are easier than others. Some models are easier than others. So, you know, if you run a product or service in a local area, that's one model that I might use. If you're an expert, or, you know, you are a trainer or a coach, that kind of thing, that would be another way to go about it. If you sell business to business, it's trickier, but I'm sure you can see from the last example of what you can do of the drip effect of just awareness. Then that is of benefit too. And the thing with BBC Local Radio is the type of people that listen. The audience are typically slightly older, so it's over 40s. They're the sort of people kind of like me who like to help other people. So you might get some word of mouth referrals, but also you'll find that people who are in positions of influence tend to listen to BBC Local Radio. So, you know, council leaders, councillors and the staff behind them, and they might be in the market for a contract for what you're offering, or they look to champion local businesses, local councils do. So that might also be helpful. You might also be thinking, oh gosh, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't even know where to start. Can you just do it for me, please? Let me go through some of these. So if you're thinking, I know what to do, I'm going to get started right away, you do need a plan. I mean, you can just, by all means, today, tomorrow, send in some text and just start taking part. But I'm sure you know the phrase, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Now, this is me, because I'll go, I've got a billion ideas and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And you start off all guns blazing, straight out the traps, you do tons of things and then go, now what? Because you've forgotten the plan, you've lost your to-do list and you don't stick to it. And it's really hard to know where you're going. So is that you as well? Will you actually stick to a plan? Now, where do you want to be in 12 months? In 12 months time, imagine your website with the BBC logo on it, with the words as heard on the BBC or as seen on the BBC, with a link to various articles, various appearances that you've made. I would want that for all of you. Or if there's a dream publication you want to be in. The chap I was talking about, the chap who's invented something, when I spoke to him and said, what's your big vision? 12 months time, what's the publication you'd really like to be in? And he mentioned this magazine and he instantly said, yeah, but that's not going to happen. And I said, but your product is ideal to appear in that magazine. So why would you not do that? And it's that mindset of, yeah, I'd really love this, but it's not going to happen. You're failing before you've even started, because actually, if you put the steps in place and come up with the right wording, the right approach, the right timing, you've got the right contact, you put in all that groundwork, there's no reason why he can't appear in that magazine. Now you might be thinking, I suspect this is most of you, I've got a few ideas, but I could do with some help, and is this even for me? So would you like a PR in a box, a DIY kit for PR? Could you create a plan for the next 12 months and learn how to do your own media publicity? So would you like to get some ideas from an expert, that is me, by the way, who loves hearing people's stories and can see news stories in everyday conversations. And kind of this is how my brain works. I have conversations with people, as I said, and just from that conversation, it probably makes me a really bad party guest, but I always think, oh, I wonder if they would come on this program and talk about so-and-so, or that's a really interesting story that you've got that people would like hearing about. And this is why I'm really loving doing this business, because I get to talk to people. I get to find out what makes them tick, who they are, why they set up their businesses, that kind of thing. Danny says, definitely like the sound of this, but a smiley face, not a smiley face, a sad face. I'm not sure why that deserves a sad face. So I have drawn up, as I said, I've downloaded 20 plus years of experience from my brain, and I have created the free media mastermind. And that, look, I really genuinely want this to be helpful to businesses, because like I said, as a news editor, quite often there's a story you want to tell on the radio, but you can't find the right guests. And similarly, there are businesses who probably wouldn't even think of contacting their radio stations. And I want to put them together so that you know what sorts of stories they might be interested in, when to get in touch, how to get in touch, the sort of things to say. Sorry, in the sun should have been smiling. Good. So I will go through, I've given you 3 of the ways to get free media publicity today, and hopefully you found that really useful. But I've drawn up a list. I've said it's 10 ways. There are loads of ways, but we've distilled it down into 10. And what I want you to do is I want you to create your own bespoke media plan for your business for the next year. So where you want to be, what you want to have achieved over the next 12 months, different aims. So easy, medium, ambitious, because we need that vision, don't we, to keep us going, keep that drive going. How you can create stories you can pitch. And that typically involves writing the perfect press release, giving you a quick guide to it, but there's more to it than that. It'd probably be a whole day course if I did it properly, but I just want you to get started. And sometimes you gather too much knowledge. I'm sure some of you have been in this boat as well. You just research everything to the nth degree and you actually don't take any action. This is about learn enough to get started, basically, just take some action. And I want you to know how to prepare for an on-air interview. How to really milk your free media publicity. That's the thing I was talking about, the narrative arc. We'll go into much more detail in that, and how not to get into legal or editorial trouble on air or in print. There is a massive book called the BBC's Editorial Guidelines. It's available online should you wish to read it. Rachel, I don't see many job opportunities in media for people with disabilities. You absolutely should see do you mean job opportunities as in working in the media, or do you mean getting publicity, Billy and Lorena? Because both absolutely should be possible. The BBC is and actually, you know, the world is getting more clued up to being much more representative of the audiences they serve, and in the BBC they are monitoring all manner of diversity and really big at making sure that it's representing stories of, you know, about people with disabilities, but having people with disabilities as experts and contributors because they're people, not because of their disability, as it should be. So we're talking about not getting into editorial trouble. Now, obviously, as I said at the very beginning, the BBC doesn't do advertising, but it can promote your business. It's a bit of a fine line. So we talk about that fine line and what you can expect, what you can kind of get away with saying and what you absolutely shouldn't say. And then separately, I do an interview masterclass. And the reason it's separate is I know some people are quite nervous about this, about talking on air, that kind of thing. But also I want it to be at the right time for you. So I want it to be at the point where you've been asked to do an interview so we can talk about it. So we'll do a bit in the masterclass, but separately there'll be an interview masterclass so that it comes at the right time. Otherwise you'll forget it all and not know what's going on. And I'll talk about the exact people to target. And from my contact book, I will give you direct contacts. So email addresses for specific people in specific newsrooms that are right for you and what you do. And also, this is probably the most valuable thing because of my weird brain, a one-to-one call with me. So that's to talk about your media plan, what you're going to do for the next year, but we'll talk about your business. And, you know, obviously I'll see stuff in there that you won't have thought of probably. And similarly, you'll know more about your business than anybody. You'll have thought of stuff that I won't know about. So, you know, putting those two things together, and we will come up with where you can maximize the chances of getting that visibility. BBC is brilliant. UK has more acceptable, but other countries, including USA, far behind. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but you're right. I think even the language behind disability, I still feels wrong to me that they call people in wheelchairs handicapped people. It's a language thing, and that's a USA thing. Andrew says, I found 2 new suppliers by finding short news reports about wholesalers on the BBC website. Excellent, glad to hear it, and very resourceful, Andrew. So it shows you're a bit of a lateral thinker, I think. Oh, skip past that, a crucial bit. So you will get all that for £97. Now, I charge that just for a one-to-one with me. So all the other good stuff, I'll flip back to it, kind of is on top of that. So 10 ways to get free media publicity, coming up with your plan, which you'll come up with, but we'll go through it together, how you can create stories you can pitch, and then turning that into a perfect press release, making sure that you're kind of interview ready. We do that in 2 hits, how to really maximize any publicity you get, and now how not to land up in court or libel people, and really valuable, exactly who to target so you can start building up that relationship. This really is kind of short-circuiting the whole thing rather than just doing it yourself. You get to really benefit from me and my contacts, basically. And I've also added some extras just for you guys, because, you know, I've done a lot of Saturday school as well, and have come through the Internet Business School myself. And, you know, we're family. So my next Media Mastermind is on the 7th of May, Saturday, the 7th of May. It's 10 till 1. So it's typically around 3 hours training. We have a short coffee break in the middle, and recordings will be available afterwards. Now, extra offers for you guys. Now, I know that a lot of people do have businesses where they work on their own, but if you've got a partner, it doesn't have to be a business partner. You might just want them to come along anyway, just so you can see, they can see what you're doing. And if you've got a business partner, even better, because you can work on that plan together, and you can divide up perhaps who you're targeting and how you're going to go about it, and they can come along free or watch the recordings free, obviously. I will also give you guys extra interview support, because I'm realizing it is an area where some people are really particularly nervous and worried about how they come across. So I want to create something that's just a little bit more bespoke, because that's going to be different for everybody. There will be people who are really confident, but you kind of don't want to come across as too confident. So yeah, I'll give you extra interview support specific for you. And I've never offered this before. I'll personally sign off your first press release. There's 2 reasons for that. Is one, I want you to be really confident that what you've written is right, that you're going to come across in the right way, that you've put all the right things in. And so that will give you a template for any future press releases you do. But also, secondly, I want you to actually do it, because people will go through the course and they'll have good intentions. And quite often, partly because the publicity is free, obviously the course isn't free, but yeah, we quite often will go, oh, I'll get round to that eventually, and it just gets put on the back burner. It drops off the bottom of the to-do list. But if you've got that appointment to talk to me about your first press release, I'm hoping that will mean you're much more likely to do it. Now, I know this is fairly short notice, it's a few weeks away, I think, but if you can't make the 7th of May, I'm running these about every month, so there typically will be one in June. I haven't set the date yet, but if you book it now, I'll make sure I hold your place for the one in June if you can't make the 7th of May, but I'm really hoping that you guys can, because that will be great. Now, you might also be thinking, oh, could you just do it all for me, please? This is all too much. The answer to that is actually maybe. I do work with a small number of people, and there's a good reason why it's a small number of people. It's because I give a lot more time, obviously. So I need to make sure that the people I work with are a good fit, in that I'm promoting the right kind of people, in that I can add real value to what they want and get real exposure for them. I also, I need to be confident that I can help you. So I only have 5 spots available on that. But it involves working with me for 6 months initially. I promise to send out at least 4 press releases, and that's kind of 4 different occasions, but 1 press release going to lots of different media organisations typically, and flagging up other media opportunities, and sorting out all the nitty-gritty for people. Is this course only for BBC and in the UK? Billy and Lorena asks. Good question, because I know I wang on about the BBC a lot. The stuff I talk about does focus on the BBC, and that's where my contacts are from. So, but apart from that, all the other stuff applies to other media organisations. So other radio stations, all newspapers, specialist magazines, TV stations. So that's the only bit that's very BBC specific. I talk about the BBC because that's where there's a big opportunity, but opportunities are everywhere. And part of it is making you aware of what those things are and how you can utilise things like the news cycle throughout a year and those events that come up. So Easter weekend, you know, there are businesses that have capitalised on Easter. In fact, I meant to mention it earlier. There's a story I did yesterday. I read it, I didn't do any of the work for it, about a fish and chip shop that's doing deep fried cream eggs. There is a video if you want to look for it. It looks disgusting. And I like a cream egg and I like fish and chips. So things like that, if you're spotting an opportunity where you can create a news story or comment as an expert, that can be anywhere. That can be any media organisation that you're approaching and that you build that relationship up with. Only you're going to really know that unless we chat about it and talk about it. I hope that makes sense. So if you're interested in working with me, and I really, really hope you want to, and I hope you've got really good value out of today, please fill out a form and also take down my email address, because I'm happy for you to just ping me an email if at any point in the future, now or in the future, just to ask any general questions or to do the course maybe at a later date. And I'll put that in the chat as well. It has got some time slots on there to book appointments. I'm very aware that tomorrow is Easter Sunday and I haven't managed to buy any Easter eggs yet. And I went to Tesco's yesterday. I might put the HTTPS on the front actually. Where have I got that? HTTPS. And they didn't have any Easter eggs left. So I've got an Easter egg crisis. So that's my mission after this. And then Easter Sunday, I've kind of decided that we all really need the day off, don't we? And I don't think I've had a day off everything, probably since the start of the year, because I've got so many bits that I do. So obviously I'm freelancing at the BBC and I do a lot of stuff like this and some other training and some other bits and bobs, as well as I've got a house full of young adults today as well, and annoying cats. So thanks very much for bearing with me. No more questions that I can see. Do I train people or teach or train others? Do I train people to teach or train others? I train people. I don't know what you mean. Do I train people to teach them what? Billy and Arena. Link can't be found. Maybe it needs a maybe. Oh, I've put the wrong thing in, that's why. bit.ly/free media. So try that. No, I've still got that wrong. No, that is right. HTTPS. So, Billy and Lorena, can you clarify what your question is? So there are two things. My training course basically is I'm teaching you everything I know so that you can do your own PR. Basically, you can get your own media publicity. Can we train others once we learn from you, and do you provide support? Technically you can do. I'd rather you didn't just steal my stuff. Obviously I've got my own contacts and I've got the experience. If you work with other businesses who might benefit from this, then there is an opportunity where we might be able to work together and you could offer them my training. That might be easier for you to do and earn some money. But drop me an email and we can have a conversation. So that's rachel@freemediapublicity.co.uk. I'm not taking any money today, guys. So we'll do that when we have a call. So thanks very much for that. How much is the done for you plan? I'm getting asked. I deliberately haven't said, actually. It's kind of, yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Ian. That's really helpful. I'll copy and paste that. Thanks for doing my work for me. I do appreciate it. And that is, yeah, No, it's .co.uk, not .com. That is my website. Let me just come out of this a sec. If I can. I don't know that I can actually. Okay, if you're interested, if you email me, then I will send you the link if that link's not working. Andy says, great content and ideas. Sounds a great course and well worth working with you. Thanks, Andy. Please, could you type and share your email? Yes, it's rachel@freemediapublicity.co.uk. rachel@freemediapublicity.co.uk. I'm sorry that I can't get you onto the bit.ly page. I thought I'd check that and I thought it was working. Thanks, Rachel. That was fantastic. That's my pleasure, Rona. Thank you very much for being there. And for joining on a Saturday morning. Thank you, Rachel. You are good and beautiful. Thank you very much, Billy and Lorena. I'm sure you guys are as well, even though I can't see you. I will leave this screen up because just in case you still need the link. So I look forward to talking to you guys later. But if you've got any other questions, do ask. Oh yes, I was talking about the Done For You plan. It's so it's 6 months of working with me, and it's £497 for 6 months. If you're paying a retainer to a PR business, it'd be a lot more than that. And like I said, I just need to make sure that I'm only working with a small group of people because it's quite a lot of work every week, and I want to make sure that it's really impactful. Danny says, book to chat with you at 5 if that works for you. That's great, Danny. Thank you. Hazel says, thank you for your great presentation. Yeah, Danny, I'll let you know if I found any Easter eggs by then as well. Talk to you later.